Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, an NES game gets Super, another movie face-off we all dreamt of, and an RPG sequel. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is November 10th, 1993. One of the biggest NES games of all time, which was a sports game, gets a 16-bit upgrade. Released in November 1993, was Tecmo Super Bowl for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Tecmo Super Bowl is an American football game. Pick your favorite real NFL team and go up against another, either in quick play or in a full season. It covers the entire 1991 through 1993 seasons, complete with real players. Not sure what else to tell you, it sure is football. Tecmo Super Bowl is basically an upgraded port of the cult classic NES game, and the NES game was massively popular. There are still tournaments running for it to this day. The 16-bit versions upgraded all of the graphics and sound effects, along with small things like putting the team logos in the end zone. Previews for the game emphasized all updates and changes, especially noting the graphics. They showcased all the cinematic moments that happen in every game, little cutscenes that pop up for passes, close catches, and of course, touchdown celebrations. This was back in the time where the biggest, most well-known football game there was around was Tecmo Bowl. A new generation sequel was excitedly anticipated. It was supposed to show up sooner, as an early advertisement in a 1992 GamePro issue gave a vague "coming soon" for the Sega Genesis. Then, in the summer of 1993, right before the football season began, lots of magazine advertisements and previews heavily pushed the new release. Were these as loved as the NES original? No, but they were still good. EGM and GamePro both said it was generally an enjoyable upgrade, especially with the cutscenes and the digitized voices. But the fact that all the players were basically the exact same sprites as the NES game was bothersome. Still, they did well enough to get numerous sequels. Tecmo Super Bowl 2 and 3 would also come out for the two consoles the following years, along with a PlayStation 1 version in 1996. These games have never been ported, and the last Tecmo Bowl we saw was Tecmo Bowl Throwback for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2010. One of the first SNES RPGs gets a sequel. Also released in November 1993, was ActRaiser II. ActRaiser II is a side-scrolling action game. Run, jump, and swing your sword to defeat enemies. New abilities include even more magic spells, being able to slightly fly and use a shield to block. Slash through numerous levels from mushroom forests, burning castles, and underwater caverns. At the end of levels, fight a boss based on one of the 7 deadly sins. ActRaiser II was developed and published by Enix. ActRaiser 1 was released in November 1991, pretty near the console's North American release. It quickly became a pretty big seller in North America. Its unique blend of platforming action, role-playing elements, and the world map city builder made it a great near-launch title and quickly became a fan favorite. According to an interview in the 1997 issue of Game Fan magazine, ex-Quintet developer Kei Kobushi explained that ActRaiser 2 came about specifically because Enix of America requested it. The first game went over so well, they wanted another, but one that would be more in line with the tastes of American players. Which basically meant get rid of all the city building and RPG stuff. They wanted a pure action game. Game director Masayo Hashimoto said in interviews he wanted to make a more up-tempo game where the action doesn't let up. But really, it's because Enix of America demanded it. Every single preview and advertisement for the game touted this as a feature. No boring, slow, populous gameplay, only action. These days, it's seen as a terrible omission of what made the original ActRaiser so memorable. Still, it reviewed incredibly well. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it an 8.75 out of 10, along with the Editor's Choice Gold Award. GamePro gave it a 4.4 out of 5, and Nintendo Power with the lowest score at a 3.7 out of 5. Everyone found the graphics absolutely gorgeous, one of the best on the system, and the music an overall improvement over the original. These days, people agree that it does look really good, but it isn't as fun as the first game. People like the city builder stuff, and ActRaiser 2 had less reliable controls and hit detection. At one point, both games were going to be remade for the Sega Saturn, but that fell through. The plans for it ended up in a spiritual successor called Solo Crisis for Saturn that was never released outside of Japan. ActRaiser II has never been re-released or ported onto anything else. We already had one 80s crossover dream, so how about a second one as a treat? Released in November 1993 for the Super NES was Robocop vs. Terminator. Robocop vs. Terminator is a side-scrolling action game. Play as Robocop, blasting away every enemy in your way, including but not limited to numerous Terminators. Find additional weaponry to use like bigger guns and rocket launchers. There's also a few first-person shooting levels using Mode 7 graphics. Face some familiar bosses like the Ed 209 and take down Skynet from eradicating humanity. Robocop vs. Terminator began life as a mini-comic series in 1992. It only had 4 issues, but it was popular enough to ignite debate about who would win, Robocop or a Terminator. It was the same kind of schoolyard debate that was sparked by Aliens vs. Predator. The video game was developed by Interplay and published by Virgin Interactive. To help tie it into the comic, the game has its cutscenes displayed in comic book style panels, complete with speech bubbles. Besides the television commercial and the 2-page magazine advert, the best use of marketing that Robocop vs. Terminator got was the box itself. Rather than the usual cardboard like every other Super NES game, it got an all-black, hard plastic box with the logo embossed onto it. It's a very simple thing, but this certainly made it stand out on the shelf of any game store or rental shelf. Plus, the box is all black, which automatically means it's really cool. Reviews for the game were unenthused. The gameplay is slow and muddy, the enemies are kind of idiots, and frankly, not very fun to shoot. The only review we could find was from Electronic Gaming Monthly, who scored it with a 5.8 out of 10. To be clear, there is a Sega Genesis version that is the same concept, but developed by Virgin Games. It's faster paced, has more action, and has a lot more blood in it. It's widely considered to be the better version, but it doesn't release for a couple more months. Every version of Robocop vs. Terminator, the SNES, the Genesis, the Game Boy, and the Game Gear, would never get ported or re-released onto anything else. And here he is with the other crossover we've all been waiting for, Everything Else This Week versus Editor Dylan.
Have you ever wondered if playing VR games while on drugs makes you smarter? Well, the Lawnmower Man seems to think so. At least I think that's what the movie was about. But the SNES game isn't just another run-of-the-mill movie tie-in side-scroller. I mean, it is a side-scroller, but get to the next level and now it's a first-person flying game. It's nothing revolutionary, but there was effort here. The only thing that would improve it would be to put guns in it. They put guns in it! Now all that's missing is a third-person vehicle section. Third-person vehicle section with guns in it. Okay, they definitely put a lot of effort in here. And while I may not dig the source material, I'd still say it's worth a look for the variety alone. I guess movie games don't always have to be hot trash. For the SNES is half the cast of Robocop vs. Terminator and is less than half as fun. I personally wasted an entire weekend rental with this game back in the day, and I clearly still haven't gotten over it. The side-scrolling sections are whatever. It's like a slower Last Action Hero. But the bike sections are impossible to comprehend. I could never get past them. But let's get back to the something versus something else train with Alien vs. Predator, The Last of His Clan for the Game Boy. Like the Super Nintendo AVP, it still doesn't hold a candle to the arcade beat-em-up. It's a side-scroller that I hesitate to call a Metroidvania because each level is self-contained. But it contains elements of the genre like mapping out the area as you explore or collecting power-ups and key items to open previously inaccessible pathways. It's way too repetitive to recommend. But there is another more traditional Metroidvania on the Game Boy this week with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue. It breaks the typical Turtles formula of the side-scrolling beat-em-ups and goes full-on exploration mode. Find other characters with their own unique abilities to open up secrets and paths. It's awesome. Not all that surprising when you consider it was made by Konami in their prime. Can they keep up the quality licensed Game Boy games? We'll see with Tiny Toon Adventures 2, Montana's Montana's Movie Madness.
Buster Bunny and his toony friends are back in a madcap chase through the movies as he steps into the films themselves with new action-oriented movements for Game Boy. Tiny Toon Adventures, Montana's Movie Madness.
I was skeptical this would be another Movie Maker situation like we got on the NES a while back. But no, another solid side-scrolling platformer. Konami's 2 for 2 when it comes to great licensed Game Boy games. So let's see if this last game will be the combo breaker. Batman the Animated Series needs no introduction, unless it's introduced by the legendary classic Batman intro sequence, which, thankfully, Konami actually did. Let's take a look. Alright, I'm gonna knock you down a point for lack of thunderclap, but other than that, great effort. Now say what you want about Konami. They are a shell of they sold themselves to, but they are truly the EA. Okay, maybe don't say everything you want about Konami, but they really knew how to respect their licensed games. For the most part. 10 games came out on these consoles this week in 1993. Still sick while writing and recording these segments, by the way. Hence, I didn't go too in-depth with anything. I'm just relieved I didn't get the football game this week. Although I did talk about Tecmo Bowl at the beginning of the year, and pretty much said everything you said.
See, this is why I make you do it.
I'll try to get creative with the sports games next week.
Dude, after all that, whatever you want.
Dope, I'll get started on the script right away. Where's the cough medicine?
Alright, thank you, Dylan. Here in the collector's corner, Tecmo Super Bowl may not have sold as much as the NES version, but it's still easy to find. It had an MSRP of $49.95 for both consoles, and now it's $13 on SNES and $6 on Sega, while it's $40 for an SNES complete version and a mere $15 for it on Sega. ActRaiser II has stayed decent. Its release price was $54.95, and now it's $30 for the cartridge. Completed with the box, manual, and the poster, then it's worth $165. Robocop vs. Terminator has rusted. The card is $18, but with the manual and that sick plastic box, it shoots up to $160. And that's it for today. Next week, a sequel you didn't realize was one, a fighting game parody, and do the math. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Tom Perslin, Samuel Allen, and Skizzy. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you've played any of the games this week, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. And please check us out over on Patreon, patreon.com/now90s. Any Patreon support at $5 or more gets you all kinds of cool little stuff. We've got pilot episodes, we've got blooper reels. Every single month you can actually see the upcoming release schedule and help us decide which games we want to cover. That's how Tecmo Super Bowl got here. So thank you all over there for your support.